Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class we will learn Tosfos Dibra Maschil Rechava Shisha Pater. Let's begin by looking at the chart of the Gemara so we can see what Tosfos is coming to explain. So here in the Gemara we had the teaching of Abaya that if somebody threw a basket that qualifies as a Rishus HaYachid and he threw it from the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim, he is Pater. So this is the part of the Gemara that Tosfos is coming to talk about and explain, and let's see the general outline of Tosfos. Abaya said that if one threw a basket that's 10 tefachim high and 6 tefachim wide into the Rishus HaRabim, he is Pater. So there are two parts to Tosfos. Number one, Tosfos will explain why the person is Pater in this case. Rashi said he's Pater because he threw a Rishus and not an object. The person is only Chai for throwing an object. He's not Chai for throwing a Rishus. Tosfos is going to give a different explanation for why he's Pater. And the second part of Tosfos, which is actually based on the first part, is Tosfos will ask that Abaya should hold that he's Chayiv since the landing happens before it becomes a Rishus HaYachid. And we'll see the explanation of this second part of Tosfos in the flowchart itself. But the point is there are two parts to Tosfos. Number one, Tosfos explains why he's Pater, and based on Tosfos' explanation for why he's Pater, there's going to be a question which is, according to this explanation, he should actually be Chayiv. So let's see Tosfos now in the flowchart form. Abaya said that if the basket is 6 tefachim across and 10 tefachim high, it's a Rishus HaYachid and he's Pater. So Tosfos explains, and it's in a purple arrow pointing upwards because it's explaining something we learned in the Gemara. And Tosfos says, why is he Pater? Because the basket becomes a Rishus HaYachid when it lands, and it's like throwing from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid through Rishus HaRabim. The way Tosfos understands the reason for the Patur is that when the basket lands, it becomes a Rishus HaYachid. So we don't look at it as the person threw a Rishus HaYachid, but rather when it lands, it becomes a Rishus HaYachid. So it comes out that the person threw from the Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid through a Rishus HaRabim. And Tosfos completes the point and says, which is Pater, like we said, we don't learn Zerik from Meishit. If a person is Meishit, the person passes an object from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaYachid through a Rishus HaRabim, he's Chayev. However, if he throws an object from the Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaYachid through a Rishus HaRabim, he's Pater, and that's why he's Pater. So here Tosfos is simply explaining the reason why he's Pater. And now Tosfos continues on and supports what he's saying by negating a question on it, which is, and even according to Rabbi Akiva, who says Kluto Kamisha Hun Chadamia, even according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that an item contained in the ear of a Rishus is as if it's resting. So the way Tosfos views it, that it's an item, not a Rishus, until it lands. So according to Rabbi Akiva, when he threw it from the Rishus HaYachid over the Rishus HaRabim, we say Kluto Kamisha Hun Chadamia. It's contained, and therefore it's as if it's resting. So it should be Chayev, because the object is at rest in the Rishus HaRabim. Tosfos explains, here it's Pater, because wherever it rests, it's considered a Rishus HaYachid. When a Rabbi Akiva applies Kluto Kamisha Hun Chadamia, that it's contained, it's as if it's resting, so if it's as if it's resting, then it becomes a Rishus that's resting. Just like when it actually rests. We said it becomes a Rishus HaYachid when it lands. So if we say it's as if it's resting, it's as if it landed, then it becomes a Rishus when it lands. So once again, he threw from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid over Rishus HaRabim, which is Pater. And this is the first part of Tosfos. And now we're going to move on to the second part, which is a question. And before we get into the question itself, we'll just point out that this question is a very long question. We start off with a question, then some lead-up information into the next part of the question, then some additional background information to the actual completion of the question itself. So Tosfos starts off and says, here it seems that it's clear to Abaya that we say it landed after it became a Rishus HaYachid. In other words, we don't say first it landed and it's still an object and then it became a Rishus HaYachid, because he would then be Chayev. Rather, we say that the status of the Rishus HaYachid takes effect before the landing, and therefore we look at it that it was thrown from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid because it's already a Rishus HaYachid through a Rishus HaRabim. So Tosfos now is going to bring some background information to challenge this. He says, and Rabbi Yechanan asks in Perek HaZerik, the question is as follows: a pit that's 9 tefachim deep, and a person dug out a tefach and placed it in Rishus HaRabim. So here we have a pit. It says 10 tefachim because it's including the lower part, which is not part of the pit. A person dug out 1 tefach and placed it in the Rishus HaRabim. So Rabbi Yechanan asks a question, and that is, do the lifting of the tefach and making the Rishus happen together, and he's chayiv or not? What do we say? Do we say that when he lifted it up, it became now a Rishus HaYachid because it's 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, so he carried from Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaRabim, and he's chayiv or not? Or do we say, no, first he lifted it up, it wasn't yet a Rishus HaYachid, he lifted it out of whichever of the Carmelis, which it is at the time, and then it became a Rishus HaYachid, so he's not going to be Chayiv. And then Rabbi Yechanan continues and says, and if you say, since originally it wasn't a Rishus HaYachid, so he's not Chayiv. If you'll say over here, when it started off, it wasn't 10 tefachim deep, it wasn't a Rishus HaYachid, so he's not going to be Chayiv. The question now is, a pit that is 10 tefachim deep, and a person placed dirt in it, What's the din? So let's see the case. We have a pit that is 10 tefachim deep. So we have the reshus in place before the story began. And a person lifted up some dirt and he placed it inside of it. And now it's not anymore 10 tefachim deep. Now, for example, it's 9 tefachim deep. What do we say here? What's the din? Do we say placing an item and removing the reshus? So his question is, do we say that he placed it in and he's going to be chayiv? Or do we say he's going to be pater because once he put it in, it's not a reshus yachid anymore? But the point that we want to bring out over here from Rabbi Yechanan is not so much all the information in the cases, but more that the second case is more of a reason to be chayiv. The point we're bringing out is that in the first case, we are more likely to say pater because when we started off the story, there was no reshus. There wasn't a reshus hayachid. The reshus hayachid came about through the person's actions. Whereas in the second case, there was already in place a reshus harabim and a reshus hayachid, and then the person placed it in and he removed the reshus. Over there, although he removed the reshus, the bottom line is originally there was a reshus, so it's more of a reason to be chayiv. And considering that, Tosfos now leads into his question. If so, then according to Abaye, that it's obvious to him that a mat nullifies the reshus. And now again, we're going to bring the background information. What is this referring to? For he says over there in the discussion of Rabbi Yechanan, by a pit that's 10 tefachim deep and 8 tefachim wide. So we have a pit that's 10 tefachim deep and 8 tefachim wide. And he threw a mat in it and divided it. So the person threw a mat into it and now he divided it. So it's not anymore 8 tefachim wide. Because let's say the mat is a tefach thick. So now it's 3.5 and 3.5. It's not anymore reshus hayachid. So he says over there he is pater because it's not a reshus hayachid anymore. So according to that, it comes out. So certainly he is pater when he makes the reshus hayachid, since originally it wasn't the reshus hayachid. Tosfos is basing himself on the first purple arrow pointing downwards, which is that the second case is more of a reason to be chayiv. So according to that, if Abaye holds pater by the second case, because Abaye's case is similar to the second case, we have the reshus harabim, we have the reshus hayachid, but the person then removed the status of the reshus by placing the mat in it, by throwing the mat in it. We say that he removed the reshus and he's going to be pater. So for sure in the first case, so that's the second point. We'll read it one more time in the purple arrow. So certainly he is pater when he makes the reshus hayachid. When he's making the reshus hayachid, which wasn't there originally, he's going to be pater since originally it wasn't the reshus hayachid. So now let's carry this idea that making a reshus will not be chayiv, rather will be pater. Let's carry it to our Gemara. If so, here he should be chayiv for this reason, that it's not originally a reshus, so it lands in reshus harabim and should be chayiv. Before, having a reshus would make the person chayiv in the cases we mentioned. Over here it's the opposite. Having a reshus makes him pater. If it's an object, he's chayiv because he carried from reshus hayachid to reshus harabim. He's chayiv. So it comes out over here that if Abaye says that making a reshus is pater, then the reason is because we don't look at it yet as a reshus. So the same thing should apply over here. We don't look at it yet as a reshus, and over here it should result in a chiyuv. He threw an object; it didn't yet become a reshus until after it landed. So he should be chayiv. So this is Tosfos' question. And as you can see, it consists of a lot of parts. I'm just going to review one more time for clarity. What's the question of Tosfos boiled down to? It boils down to the fact that Abaye holds that even when there was a reshus in place, if somebody nullified the reshus loses its status. So certainly if there wasn't yet a reshus, we're not going to create it. Like we explained before, we're not going to yet create the reshus like when he dug it out. Same thing when he threw the object, we're not going to yet create the reshus until after it lands. And therefore we should still view it as an object. And Tosfos answers, and this changes the entire understanding and perspective of the whole previous discussion that we quoted from Rabbi Yechanan and Abaye. We can explain that Abaye doesn't consider an akira or hanacha if it happens at the same time of making a reshus. We were learning the question, if he took the akira out, did it yet become a reshus? Did it not become a reshus? When he put it in, did it lose the reshus status? Did it not lose the reshus status? Same thing with Abaye's case, when he threw the mat in, did the mat nullify the reshus or did it first land in a reshus? We're looking at it in the context of reshus. Is the reshus yet a reshus hayachid, or is it not yet a reshus hayachid? When he placed it in, is it still a reshus hayachid, or did it now lose the status of the reshus hayachid? Tosfos changes the whole perspective. It's not about the reshus; it's about the akira and the hanacha. Do we consider an akira and hanacha when there's an issue with the reshus? So the question is not about whether the reshus has already been created or has already been removed. It's not about the reshus. It's about is the akira and the hanacha, whatever the understanding for it is. But is the akira and the hanacha valid when it's playing a role in taking or creating or removing a reshus? So it's a question about the akira and anacha. So we can explain that Abaya doesn't consider an akira anacha if it happens at the same time of making a rishus. So it comes out in the case of Abaya, let's see it. When the person threw the mat in, the reason he's pater, it's not because it's not a rishus hayachid anymore. It's because since the mat landing in the pit is playing a role in the removal of a rishus, this is not considered a hanacha. So it's not a valid hanacha. And the same thing with the akira. When the person removed it, since it's playing a role in the creating of a rishus, it's not an akira. So it's not that it's not a rishus hayachid yet. It's that the akira is not an akira. And if it's lacking an akira or lacking an hanacha, the person's not chayiv. And he finishes off. So here too, he doesn't consider the hanacha. In our case, since when it lands, that's when it becomes a rishus. So the landing is playing a role in the making of a rishus. The hanacha is not an hanacha. And therefore the person's not chayiv. And that's the second part of Tosfos. And then there's one side point, which is this understanding, we're going to say, is not just a viewpoint of Abaye, it's also the viewpoint of Rabbi Yechanan. That creates a question, so Tosfos completes his understanding by negating the question, by addressing the question. And he says, and this that Rabbi Yechanan is more sure about making a rishus than removing a rishus. According to what we're saying now, it shouldn't be a distinction between the two cases of Rabbi Yechanan, whether the person did a akira and made a rishus, or did an anacha and removed the rishus. The point is that akira and anacha are happening here at the time of the creating or removal of a rishus. They're not valid. But Rabbi Yechanan clearly said there's a distinction. He said when there's an akira made, maybe there is pater, but if there's an anacha, it should be chayev. Why is that? So if we learn it, if we learn it that it's about the rishus, it makes sense, because by the akira there wasn't yet a rishus. By the anacha, it started off with a rishus. But according to the way we're looking at it now, it doesn't make sense. Either way, the anacha happened the akira happened when he was making a rishus, and the anacha happened when he was removing a rishus. Neither of them should be valid. Explains Tosfos, because maybe we require that the akira be proper and be good, and not the hanacha. So Tosfos explains, could be that we have a greater emphasis on the akira than the hanacha. According to Rabbi Yechanan, he feels that the akira in the malacha veitzah is more important than the hanacha. The fact that he's removing it from a rishus is what we look at, not as much as the hanacha and the other rishus. And as a result, Rabbi Yechanan asks, if we say that the akira is not good, maybe that's because the akira needs to be proper. But maybe when the hanacha is at the time of making a rishus, of removing a rishus, maybe it will be good because we're not so concerned about the hanacha. So again, the point of Rabbi Yechanan would be, the question is, by the akira, maybe it's a good akira even though he's making a rishus. And if we say no, the akira needs to be 100% proper, and if it comes at the same time of making a rishus, it's not going to be good. Maybe we're only concerned about the akira. However, the hanacha, if it comes at the same time of removing a rishus, maybe we'll still consider it a hanacha. We won't be so concerned that it be a proper hanacha, and that's why he has a question about the hanacha, even though he could resolve the question about the akira. So to summarize, there's 2 points in the summary. Number one is the actual flow of Tosfos itself. He starts off by explaining why the person's pater. Not because he threw a rishus from the rishus hayachid to the rishus harabim, but rather because it became a rishus hayachid when it landed. So he threw from a rishus hayachid to rishus hayachid through a rishus harabim. And even if we say kluta kamisha hunchadamya, so when it landed, it became a rishus hayachid by the kluta point. So it's a rishus hayachid. So once again, he threw from rishus hayachid to rishus hayachid over rishus harabim. And then the second part of Tosfos was a question on Abaya, that it seems that we have information from Abaya that says that the making of a rishus, we don't look at it if it's happening at the same time. The making of a rishus, we won't look at it if it's happening at the same time as akira anacha. We find that in Abaya because he says when a person throws the mat, he's going to be pater. So certain, even though there's a rishus in place, so certainly when there's no rishus in place and he does the akira, he's going to be pater. And the understanding, the way we looked at it then is, the reason he's going to be pater is because we don't look at the rishus as a rishus. So the same thing here. Don't look at the rishus as a rishus until after it lands. So first it landed, he should be chayiv. And we answered that that's a completely incorrect way of looking at it. It's not about the rishus. Rather, it's about the akira and the hanacha. The reason Abai over there says, when the person did the hanacha over there, he's pater, is because it's not a good hanacha. And certainly when he did akira at the time of making a rishus, he won't be chayiv because it's not a good akira. And therefore, over here, it's the same thing. Since by the time of the hanacha, a rishus is being created, it's not a good hanacha. That's why the person's pater. And the one side point that Tosfos explained was that if that's the case, that it's about the akira and the hanacha, why does Rabbi Yechanan say, when there's a rishus already there, we would say chayiv, and then when there's no rishus already there, maybe we would say pater? It seems that it's related to the rishus. And we explain it's not to do with the rishus. It has to do that in the case where he's creating a rishus, it was an akira, and we're more concerned of the akira, maybe, and that's why we'd say pater. Whereas when he's removing the rishus, it's not because there was a rishus already there. That's why we'd say that he's going to be chayiv. We'd say he's chayiv because the issue over there is the hanacha. The question is about putting the dirt into the pit. It's about the hanacha, and the hanacha maybe we're not so concerned about. And the other part of the summary is just a change of perspective, which we went through. Is it about the Rishus or is it about the Akira and the Anacha?